Alright, so this video is about giving from yourself to others versus taking from someone and giving to someone else. One of the things I've seen before is that at the World Economic Forum, globalists were talking about how Christian they are and how they can build the kingdom of heaven on earth and so on. I realized that your will be done on earth as it is in heaven is part of the Jesus prayer. But that's not how the World Economic Forum people, even if they call themselves Christians, are not Christians. God brings the kingdom of heaven to earth, not the other way around. Not people. However, we can participate in bringing the kingdom of heaven to earth, but we can't make it happen ourselves, alone. However, Jesus is not with the World Economic Forum. Jesus is with the actual Christians. The World Economic Forum people that call themselves Christians are satanic, and I disapprove of them calling themselves Christians in any way, shape, or form. And the reason for that is that Christianity says, give from yourself to others. It doesn't say take from some to give to others. On the flip side, for a nation or a nation state, particularly a nation of people, possibly a province or a state in the United States sense, or a region according to Britain or something like that, I understand you are your brother's keeper. So a certain degree of welfare and disability makes sense, and so on. But you don't owe that to the entire world. You don't owe it to the entire world. To place the world's problems, worries, and cares on one particular country is satanic. And that's what the globalists and the leftists have been doing for ages. Literally trying to treat the white man as Atlas and so on, while not giving credit to them for being Atlas, basically. Basically demanding that we carry the world on our shoulders while being spat on and so on. And now, I understand there's some degree of actual Christian movements towards trying to do that on some level, but there's always in the church a very cautionary counter movement that you are not Jesus. It's follow Jesus, not you are Jesus. So for the carrying the world on your shoulders while being spat on and cursed and so on, that's Jesus's job, no one else's. And to treat people as horribly as Jesus was treated while demanding they do the same miracles as Jesus is satanic. Robin Hood stole from the rich to give to the poor, yes, but the rich in this case was the government tax man, and the poor was the working farmer, the regular person who works for a living. So there's a combination of left and right principles in Robin Hood because of the feudal system or the medieval kings and so on system, and over-taxation as well. So it's neither left nor right entirely, but the idea that you steal money from a private citizen to give to another private citizen is in most cases anathema to a good and working society. This whole reparations for things that happened before you were born and all that jazz is a no-go in any Christian or good society whatsoever. Um, the race baiting and the racial hatred mongering of the left finds some inappropriate expressions in the counter movement of the right to some extent, but it's not systematic, unlike the left's version of things. The left likes to throw around the word systemic, which means it's everyone's fault, not anyone's fault. And the right likes to point out that the left is systematic, not systemic. And systematic is different from systemic. The reason the left used the word systemic is because it has a similar sound to systematic. And systematic is from the top down, all the way down, structural and purposeful, and what's the word? Sargon talked about it. Procedural. It's procedurally unjust when it's systematic oppression. Systemic oppression means you can blame society while no one's actually guilty, and therefore everyone has to pay for what one person might have done, in a sense. That's the rough outline, although they like to pick people out as victims regardless. You know, and they purposefully pick the word systemic because it sounds like systematic, and people confuse it in their minds and so on, but it's not close to the same thing at all. No one's purposefully doing it in systemic problems, and systematic problems, everyone's doing it basically on purpose. So that's the difference. In function, at least, in how it's actually applied and practiced and approached in behavior and so on. The outcomes of actions and the actions, not the gobbledygook that the left spews and so on. So the right and the left are not the same. I think that's all I want to say, but you get a general impression of this and so on. And I just want to reiterate one more thing, which is expecting someone to carry the weight on their of the world on their shoulders, or expecting one country to do it, or expecting a small portion of the world to do it. You know, in a nation or a nation state, it makes sense to have a little bit of welfare and disability, which is technically taking from some to give to others and so on, but it's within the bounds of a tribe, basically. So a province or an American state or a region or what are they called? Luhansk and Donetsk are part of that. I can't remember what they're called exactly, but they're like an area of land that is separately governed with its own government to some extent, that is also part of the country or nation state with a bigger government that handles other things than what the local government does. But it's a form of division of within a country, basically. The closer a government is to its people, generally, in smaller groups and so on, the more personalized, tailored, and appropriate the government actually is, generally speaking. And that's really what it comes down to. So all this mass immigration, all this massive taxation, all this wealth redistribution, all this green tax, eco tax, carbon tax, all of it is placing the weight of the world on the shoulders of the white man, basically saying you're responsible for everyone else's crappy behavior and living conditions. And that's just inappropriate. We can give of ourselves voluntarily to others, but in almost every situation, except some basic welfare and disability, for those who can't help themselves within a tribe or a nation, a peoples, an ethnicity, or an ethnic formal political grouping structure. Um, a little bit of it, not a lot necessarily, just a little bit. It is inappropriate to take from some to give to others, basically. And we want to minimize that, which is why the right wing and the libertarians dislike the state so much. The right wing believes that we want to avoid taking from ourselves to give to others. We want other people to not take from us to give to others. We want to give from ourselves to others. And some people don't want to give from themselves at all, and that's understandable. And, we have to make allowances for the fact that people will be like that at times and so on, even the majority sometimes. But we should minimize taking from some to give to others regardless. And there's a strong moral argument to be made for allowing people to keep what they earn instead of taxing them to hell and back. Even as I say that on occasion, a little bit of welfare and disability makes a lot of sense. Personally, I might be biased in that regard, but I believe that we are our brother's keeper. And I realize there's brothers and sisters in Christ worldwide, but there's also brothers and sisters within our nation or tribe or ethnicity or nation, state, country, state, province, region, that kind of thing. And the two are not necessarily the same, and we should be aware of that. So the wealth redistribution from the West to the rest of the world through theft and force and coercion and stealing and fraud and so on should be stopped. And anyone that says it shouldn't be is a fraud, especially if they call themselves a Christian. But they're a fraud regardless, because it's doing no good. Because for the most part, the only reason why we give welfare and disability to people, the only reason we give disability to people, because when we give welfare, we're given a smaller amount than disability even, and it's just to get by in between jobs. But for disability, it's to help our brothers in our nation, tribe, or country, or province or state who can't take care of themselves. So the principle of he who does not work shall not eat is mostly appropriate, but it's also you are your brother's keeper when your brother is part of your tribe. So if someone cannot work, then you should take care of them as best as you can from yourself and so on. So, but at the same time, while it's understandable that charity doesn't necessarily cover all the bases and so on, so we need an official social program, it should be minimal at most. Now the thing is, and this, hear me out, the thing is, right now I make about $1,800 to $1,900 a month. I pay about $1,000 of that. So I've got about $900 left over after rent. And I'm living in a relatively half rent compared to the rest of the city building. And if I was paid the same disability as I was before, relative to rent, I would, and the inflation and the cost of living, I would not make $1,900 or $1,800. I would make approximately $2,700 to $2,800. And be able to afford a house, or not a house, but a bachelor apartment anywhere else in the city or something like that. Of course, that's with mass immigration driving up rental costs and so on. So if we kick the immigrants out, then I think the rent would go down by about a good $500, $600, $700, and I would be able to make do with $2,200 or $2,300 at most, just fine. And it would be about what I got overall for inflation-adjusted dollars. Whichever system you do, kicking the immigrants out or not kicking the immigrants out and giving more money to disability, it would be the same amount of money left over, inflation adjusted, after rent, as what I got 15 years ago on disability alone. So the moral of the story is that when you have 8 years of socialists in charge, you're actually not giving as much money to the poor and the suffering through social programs as when you have Christian capitalist conservatives in charge. And that's a whole other bag of tricks in regards to competent management of the economy and overtaxation versus taxing less but getting more money because everyone's making more money because they actually can invest in their businesses and so on, versus overtaxing and everyone's poor because they can't use any of their money to invest in their business and make more wealth, real wealth, and so on. So yeah,